welcome to This Just In.
And It's Grim, a bi weekly series where two friends of 3 decades chat about dark subjects.
Before we begin, you should be warned that our series contains language, themes, and material not suitable for children or sensitive Sallies.
So hide your babies and your boomers, and let's dig in. Welcome back.
Welcome back. So, we are still in the thick of our social justice chapter. Okay.
Yes.
And we are starting off. We're not starting off shit. We're in the middle of it.
We're in the middle of
said.
it. You just said that.
I just said that. Anyways.
Hey guys, we have lives outside of this also, and sometimes things get a little cattywampus on the outside.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
we fumble. But anyways, we are halfway through our social justice.
Yes, and so we are going over missing, murdered Indigenous women and children, and that is the topic for today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today's topic is very near and dear to our hearts. Roxanne and we've been having these conversations for like years
Really long
about
time.
how certain demographics of people receive a staggering disproportionate amount of violence. We'll start off with some statistics for you. So to give you an idea why this topic is so important, from 2001 to 2015, the homicide rate for Indigenous women in Canada was almost 6 times higher than that for other women. In the United States, Native American women are more than twice as likely to experience violence as any other demographic. 1 in 3 Indigenous women are sexually assaulted during their life. 55.5% are violently assaulted by an intimate partner. 66.4% have experienced psychological aggression from an intimate partner, and 67% of assaults are reportedly involved by non-Indigenous perpetrators, while it's estimated that 70% of assaults go unreported. So all of this is stemmed from a history of imperialism, colonization, racism, genocide. I mean, what have these people like not endured? I feel like they've just every possible horrible thing they've had to endure. I feel like the very second a white person has landed on this continent, they have done nothing but strip away every ounce of resources and dignity from these people. And whenever they realized that they couldn't just eradicate them all, they moved the rest to remote regions with little resources, took their children and placed them in residential boarding schools when they were taught that the children were taught that they were evil savages, and that they weren't allowed to learn about their culture, speak their native tongue, and practice their faith. And that was just the lucky ones. The not so lucky ones were buried in unmarked graves behind the boarding schools. When history bleeds into modern day, we are left with pain, we are left with violence and abuse, and we are left with biases from authorities that result in crimes being overlooked or not even reported. So we begin by acknowledging the lives taken, the voices silenced, and the families still searching for answers in this week's episode on missing, murdered Indigenous women and children.
So, before breaking down the details of what's going on in the States with missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, I want to throw some numbers at you guys. And all of these are straight from the BIA, or Bureau of Indian Affairs. As Amy just did, she gave you a lot of statistics. I'm talking specifically American and Alaska. So more than 84.3% of American Indian or Alaskan Native AI or AN women have experienced violence in their lifetime, or over 1.5 million. That is 10 times the national average and leads to them having the second highest murder rate among ethnic groups, African American women being first. For AIAN women, homicide is in the top 10 leading causes of death. AIAN children experience PTSD at the same rates as soldiers returning from Afghanistan and Iraq. And 48.8% of AIAN women have experienced being stalked in their lifetime. And according to every major investigation agency, like Amy said, these crimes remain heavily underreported. Now, people go missing in the States every year, about 600,000. But after a report is filed and investigations are done, 98% of those reports lead to a return of the person to their family. Unfortunately, for AIAN women and girls, they aren't included in that solve rate. Only 2% of Indigenous missing persons reports are logged into a federal database. About 5,800 Indigenous women and girls go missing every year, and the BIA does not have the resources to investigate to the same capacity that the federal or state law enforcement agencies can. Currently, there are 258 tribal law enforcement agencies scattered across the United States, including Alaska. About 4,000 officers, with the majority of agencies having less than 25 officers on the payroll. Oh, and did I mention? They are responsible for all forms of law enforcement. The resources remain incredibly scarce and spread thin. Not to mention, they generally do not have jurisdictional power to arrest, detain, or prosecute non-native offenders, even if the crime took place on a reservation. However, there are a few non-tribal agencies tasked with assisting in the very topic we are talking about, homicides and missing persons. Too bad they don't seem to help. The FBI, DOJ, DOI, and the United States Attorney's Office are federally required to assist tribal police with investigations of missing and murdered Indigenous people. But up until 1999, reports coming out from these entities did not include missing and murdered Indigenous women. And since they have begun including AI and IA persons into these state and federal databases, there have been major issues. A report from 2018 showed that of the 5,712 reported missing, only 116 were documented by the FBI. But not having the information readily available and shared isn't the only issue. Indigenous women and girls are misidentified as Hispanic or Asian so often that many of these cases aren't being categorized correctly. So let's say a girl gets murdered and everything goes right with the investigation and the information. They catch the killer and go to prosecute. This is also where these cases stop. For example, between 2005 and 2009, the United States Attorney's Office received over 10,000 cases from Indian countries to prosecute. 77% of these cases were violent crimes, and the USAO refused to prosecute over half of the cases. And to boot, tribal laws differ greatly with the state laws they share jurisdiction in. So law enforcement struggles to keep up with the variances. And even systems like the Amber Alert that have returned over 900 children to their families since its start doesn't sound off for a Native child. In May of 2016, 11-year-old Ashlyn Mike and her 9-year-old brother Ian got off their school bus at their Navajo reservation and were lured into a van. Their parents and neighbors searched frantically, and hours later, someone spotted Ian wandering the New Mexico desert. The following day, the police found Ashlyn, sexually assaulted, strangled, and bludgeoned to death. Although their parents had done everything right, there was miscommunication happening between tribal and state police, and the Amber Alert for the two kiddos wasn't issued immediately. Ashlyn's murder has led to reform of the Amber Alert system in Navajo country, primarily campaigned by her mother. Alaska has the highest rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls of all the states. There is an area of Alaska referred to as the Alaskan Triangle. Similar to the Bermuda Triangle, people have gone missing in the area for decades, over 20,000 since 1970. Locals claim the harsh landscape being the primary reason, and this could very well contribute to the overwhelming numbers of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in the state. Or it could once again be systemic and the fault of the state. Example, Florence Okpiluk, a 33-year-old woman went missing in Nome, Alaska in 2020. Nome being one of the most remote areas of Alaska, and has yet to return home. And although there were initial searches done, there hasn't been an official investigation, and the family relies heavily on social media and podcasts to get her story out. So as we close this chapter on the crisis in the United States and Alaska, we have to look past the individual names and see the jagged lines of a broken system. The thousands of women and girls who have vanished or been taken are not lost. They are being failed by a jurisdictional maze that allows perpetrators to slip through the cracks. And in Alaska, where the vastness of the land is matched only by the distance to the nearest state trooper, and in the lower 48, where tribal security is often strangled by outdated federal laws like the Major Crimes Act. The message is clear. The system was not built to protect Indigenous bodies. From the discrepancies in data collection to the racial misclassification on police reports, these systemic failures have created a culture of invisibility. And AIAN people are not just fighting an epidemic of violence. They are fighting a legacy of settler colonialism that continues to deem these lives less than. But this failure of the state is not contained by borders. The echoes of these empty chairs and unanswered calls resonate far beyond North America. The same colonial fingerprints and the same systemic apathy that haunt the tundra of Alaska and the plains of Montana are deeply felt across the ocean. Let's take a quick break for a message from our friends. And when we return, Amy will brief us on Australian missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Hey listeners, if you reside in Northwest Indiana and are feeling indulgent, you should head over to chantillyluxurychocolates.com.
The chocolates are handcrafted, and each box is filled with expertly selected pieces for both their taste and their visual aesthetic.
Not only are they delicious, with flavors like black cherry cheesecake, salted caramel espresso, and butterscotch pecan crunch, the prices can't be beat, especially for artisan-level chocolates.
And they feature rotating seasonal flavors, the ability to customize boxes, consultation services for a variety of culinary and confection inquiries, and party favors to go along with your next big event.
So, Indiana, if life is like a box of chocolates, you may as well make it luxurious. Visit chantillyluxurychocolates.com or check them out on Instagram today.
Now back to the show. The Aboriginal tribes of Australia are referred to as First Nations or First Peoples. The first documented landing by a European was the Dutch explorer Willem Janszoon in 1606. Up until then, the continent was only inhabited by the native Aboriginals. Many other European navigators charted parts of the coast over the next 150 years. British settlement began on January 26, 1788, when the first fleet carrying convicts and free settlers established a penal colony at Sydney Cove. During this period, Aboriginal tribes suffered massacres, diseases, and unrest. The last reported massacre was in 1928.
Wow.
1928 was the last
I'm shocked, actually. I don't know why I'm shocked, actually. Why am I ever shocked by the information I find out, honestly?
I mean, we're talking in the 2000s here too. Some of the shit that's going
on
still.
Yeah.
I'm just This whole entire time we've been researching this shit. I'm just like, it's just shit after shit after shit.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yes, so if you think that these people endured a lot, and we're thinking, oh, this happened a long time ago.
No,
nope. Yeah, absolutely not. So from 1910 to 1990, Aboriginal children were removed from their biological parents and put in residential foster homes or adopted to white Christian parents where they were not allowed to speak their native language, contact any of their family, and they were forced to dress and assimilate to their new family's ways. The reason why I'm going over this background info is because I didn't know about it and the colonization of Australia, and I figured I would go over it just in case there's anybody who might not know either.
I don't know a lot about it, so I would love to know more about it.
Absolutely. So when we talk about the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, we cannot ignore the catastrophic toll it's taken in Australia, where the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women face violent victimization at far higher rates than non-Indigenous women, and where systemic failures continue to deepen harm. According to recent research from the Australian Institute of Criminology, July 1989 to June 2023, 476 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women were victims of homicide, meaning murder or manslaughter in Australia. Indigenous women experienced homicide at a rate up to 7 times higher than the national average, and in nearly all cleared cases, the perpetrator was someone known to the victim. and most often an intimate partner. A separate investigation found that Indigenous women and Torres Strait Islander women have been murdered or killed in suspicious circumstances at least 315 times between 2000 to 2022. And this is almost certainly an undercount because there is no central comprehensive national database tracking these deaths and these disappearances. These women are killed at a rate of 12 times the national average, a crisis nearly invisible in public discourse. Here are a few of the cases that really highlight the injustices that have occurred. In 2017, Constance Wacho was reported missing. Almost 10 months later, her body was found in a sports bag near Brisbane's Kangaroo Point Cliffs. Her disappearance was initially tagged a medium risk by police, despite no sightings for months. Her family says that there was never,
Jeez.
that nobody was properly interviewed about her risk factors. They believe the investigation was inadequate in underscoring patterns of dismissiveness in police responses for Indigenous women cases. Investigative reporting also uncovered cases like Roberta Curry, a young Aboriginal woman who repeatedly called for police protection from a violent ex-partner. Reports show that on at least one occasion, frontline officers failed to follow domestic violence protocols and contributing to her death. Similarly, Miss Rubunsha, an Indigenous woman experiencing serious violence from a partner, was killed in a sudden and brutal act outside a hospital car park, even after authorities had been called multiple times over the course of the abusive relationship. One of the most heartbreaking sets of cases in Australia involves the Bowraville murders in New South Wales. Between September 1990 and early 1991, three Aboriginal children, there's Colleen Walker Craig, and she was 16, Evelyn Greenup, and she was 4. There's Clinton Speedy Durow, and he was also 16, and they disappeared from the town of Bowraville. 2 of the bodies were later found. Colleen's remains have never been recovered. Investigators were slowed by inadequate police response and apparent racial bias at the time. And though one suspect was charged and acquitted, justice has never been fully achieved for these families. Renewed searches for Colleen's remains have continued decades later, reflecting ongoing efforts to confront this unresolved tragedy. Known but equally tragic case is that of Queenie Hart, a 28-year-old Aboriginal woman murdered in 1975 in Rockhampton, Queensland. Her case went unsolved for decades, and with family and supporters alleging that racial bias contributed to the lack of conviction, Hart's remains were buried in an unmarked grave until community efforts led to her reburial in her homeland in 2022. Her story highlights the long struggle Indigenous families face in finding dignity and justice after loss. Families, advocates, and Indigenous leaders have repeatedly pointed to systemic racism and inadequate policing as barriers to justice. Many relatives of missing women say they were told their loved one had gone a walkabout, which is their term for just going somewhere, really, like
a hike or
wandering around.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, a deeply harmful stereotype rather than having their disappearance taken seriously. In some cases, police investigations were downgraded, delayed, or characterized by miscommunication as dismissive approaches that leave families feeling ignored. Despite these challenges, Indigenous communities continue to demand accountability and structural change. Calls have been made for a national framework to record and track missing and murdered First Nation women and children, better support for grieving families, cultural competent policing reforms, and long-term commitments to ending gender-based and domestic violence in Indigenous communities. Now Rox is going to go over information involving missing, murdered Indigenous women in Latin America.
Yeah. And before I start off, I just want to preface this by highlighting the obvious. I'm a white woman in America. If I mispronounce any of these names, I apologize ahead of time. I did listen to the pronunciation, but that does not mean I retained remembering how to pronounce everything, but I will do my best. Okay. As we turn our focus to the Southern Hemisphere, the terminology shifts from missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls to the harrowing cry of feminicidio indigenous, or indigenous femicide. Here, the violence is a direct byproduct of a triple frontier of danger: the illegal extraction of resources, the militarization of ancestral lands, and a profound legal apathy that treats Indigenous bodies as disposable, and the statistics are staggering. In countries like Brazil, reports indicate that an Indigenous woman is killed every 48 hours, with the Guarani Kiowa people facing some of the highest rates of targeted violence in the world due to land disputes. In Colombia, the National Indigenous Organization, or ONIC, has recorded that over 60% of Indigenous women have experienced physical or sexual violence, with the Wayuu and Nasa peoples being disproportionately targeted by paramilitary groups and cartels. The crisis is fueled by a lack of ethnic categorization in government data. In Peru, while thousands of women go missing annually, the state frequently fails to record their heritage, effectively erasing the Quechua and Aymara identities of the victims. This data vacuum is a systemic tool. If the victims aren't counted as Indigenous, the state doesn't have to address the specific colonial roots of the violence. We are looking at a landscape where the Yanomami in the Amazon are battling illegal mining man camps that bring sex trafficking into their villages, and where the Mapuche in Chile and Argentina face state-sanctioned violence for defending their water rights. Madre Tierra, Mother Earth, is inseparable from the struggle for the lives of the women who protect it, and why the disappearance of a woman in the Andes is often the first step in the disappearance of a culture. In the last decade, femicide rates for Indigenous women increased by nearly 50%. In certain states, largely linked to garimpos, or illegal gold mines. In Colombia, over 1,500 Indigenous women were victims of targeted violence following the 2016 peace accords, as illegal groups moved in to fill power vacuums in tribal lands. In Peru and Bolivia, statistics suggest that Indigenous women are 3 to 4 times more likely to experience domestic and state violence than non-Indigenous women. Yet legal representation in their native languages is almost non-existent. And of course, the double invisibility across the continent, where an estimated 90% of cases of violence against Indigenous women go unpunished. 16, lost my spot again, my bad. Okay, in 2016, Caceres, a world-renowned environmental activist, was assassinated in her home after years of leading a campaign against the Agua Zarca Dam, which threatened the sacred Guadalcarque River. Her case became a global symbol because it was proven in court that her murder was a calculated plot involving executives from the dam company, state agents, and military-trained hitmen. It exposed how corporate interests and state failure collide to eliminate Indigenous opposition. In Brazil, thousands of illegal miners have invaded Yanomami territory. This has led to the disappearances of women and girls into sex trafficking camps, as well as mass deaths from introduced diseases and mercury poisoning. In 2023, the Brazilian government declared a medical emergency and genocide investigation. It serves as the primary example of how illegal mining creates a lawless zone where missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls cases go completely unrecorded and uninvestigated. Now, I'm going to shift into what is happening in Europe, but let's take a breather. I'm sure it's needed.
Hey listeners, if you live in Colorado and haven't added functional fungi to your wellness routine, you might be missing that key ingredient.
That's right. Studies show that mushrooms can have a variety of benefits, and the folks over at Activated Brands have done the science for us.
Located in Arvada, Colorado, Activated uses the latest in extraction technology to create high-quality mushroom products like gummies and elixirs.
So you get the benefit in convenient and tasty ways, like sour melon or strawberry horchata gummies, and the apple mint elixir.
And not just products, Activated Brands host workshops, offer a community workspace to local growers, and have all the supplies, information, and advice available if you want to grow for yourself.
And that's why you can trust a company like Activated Brands. They are always willing to share their expertise. But don't take our word for it. Go see for yourself. The lab is open.
For more information like hours and location, or to order products, you can visit activatedbrands.com or check them out on Instagram.
Now back to the show. No. Okay. And we're back. In Europe, the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement is often framed through the lens of decolonization and the specific failure of the state to protect women whose cultures were historically suppressed. As the most prominent Indigenous group in Europe, the Sami experienced structural invisibility. Because Nordic countries often pride themselves on being the most egalitarian in the world, the specific risks faced by Sami women are frequently overlooked by mainstream media. Victims often face a double silence, one from the state, which fails to provide Sami-speaking police or therapists, and one from within the community, where there is often a fear that reporting violence will further stigmatize the Sami culture in the eyes of the public. Now moving on, Greenland is an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. The Inuit population, or the Kalaaleq, faces a crisis of missing and murdered women that mirrors the North American missing and murdered Indigenous women movement. Many Inuit women move to Denmark for education or work, where they face intense racial profiling and higher rates of homelessness. This transition often makes them targets for predatory violence. And in the Nenets Autonomous Okrug and parts of Siberia, Indigenous women face a unique intersection of environmental and physical threats. Much like the man camps in North America, the encroachment of oil and gas industries into indigenous lands in Russia has brought a surge of transient workers. This is often followed by reports of missing women and unexplained deaths that are rarely investigated by federal authorities. For nomadic Nenets herders, the vastness of the tundra and a lack of communication infrastructure mean that if a woman goes missing, it may be weeks before it is reported. And people are often unwilling to travel to remote locations. Another major hurdle for European missing and murdered Indigenous women is the data itself. Many European countries do not collect ethnic data in crime statistics to avoid profiling, but this makes it impossible to prove that Indigenous women are being targeted. Here's a quote that sums this up. "To be Indigenous in Europe is to be a ghost in the system. We cannot fix a crisis that the government refuses to count."
Yeah. Wow. I didn't even think about Greenland and all those other countries as well.
So many places. I was like European Indigenous, like tribes, native, and wow, way more than I knew about and thought or expected to find,
Absolutely. My goodness. Okay. So we're going to move on to the Canadian portion of this, and it's
Probably
lot.
the heaviest. Yeah.
It really is. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a huge, vast area. We obviously know that United States is a huge area as well, but Canada is also just as huge. The area was, all purely like natives, and it was very similarly taken over by, it seems like it's the same motherfucking story.
Yeah.
Anyways.
They just rinse and repeating the same bullshit.
My goodness, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay, so in Canada, Indigenous women make up 4% of the female population, but are significantly overrepresented among homicide victims, being 16% of female homicide victims in the reported data, a stark indicator of systemic inequality. Indigenous women are also far more likely to experience violence in their lifetimes compared to non-Indigenous women. I know I probably sound like a broken record, but this is something I feel like...
Can I just say that? When I kept giving my statistics, I was like, it sounds like Amy just gave these exact same statistics, but like, that's how bad it is everywhere. It's just how bad it is everywhere. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It's like, so like I said, we probably sound like we're just repeating ourselves, but this is something that needs to be repeated over and over until it actually fucking sinks in.
Yeah.
Police and government records have struggled to track these cases accurately, in part due to inconsistent recording of Indigenous identity and crime data. To understand the crisis facing Indigenous communities today, we must confront the shared history of colonization across Canada, the United States, and Australia, as well as many other countries and continents across the world. These nations were built on systemic displacement, control, and attempted erasure of Indigenous peoples. Moving on to more recent atrocities, I would like to start with a young lady named Tina Fontaine. She was only 15 years old when her body was wrapped in plastic, then wrapped in a blanket and weighed down with rocks in the Red River of downtown Winnipeg, Canada. Tina's grandfather was a survival of residential schools, and his trauma from his time there was the main cause of his severe alcoholism and violence. At the age of 12, her father, Eugene Fontaine, left his home in Sagking, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, First Nation to Winnipeg, where he was homeless and became addicted to alcohol. Tina's mom was raised in Bloodvine First Nation. Starting at the age of 6, Tina was removed and returned to her mother several times by Child and Family Services. She was removed permanently at the age of 10, and then she was removed repeatedly and was beginning to be sexually exploited by adults in her life, and she started to use drugs and alcohol. When her parents met, her mother was only 12 and her father was 23. In the spring of 1996, her mother gave birth to her first child at the age of 14. That child was immediately and permanently taken away from her by Child and Family Services. Tina was the second child born in 1999. Her mother eventually had a third child in 2000. You can do the math. She was obviously way too young to be having any kids. I could honestly go on forget forever about all of the traumatic shit that has happened in this girl's life. But her dad was beaten to death when Tina was 12. In 2019, a report notes that CFS, which is Child Family Services, knew that Tina was struggling with grief, and the files notes that she was frequently absent from school, she had been suspended from school, got into fights, received medical help for self-harm injuries, and had been reported missing 3 times. During the period from when her dad died till when she died, her family reached out multiple times to get help from CFS, but they did little to help Tina. In early 2014, at the age of 15, Tina went to Winnipeg to visit her mom. She was staying at a hotel that was housed from CFS, so they helped her get a hotel room. They knew where she was. Her aunt confirmed that she stayed with her off and on during the first week, but after that, she was reported missing. So she also was pulled over for driving drunk. The police officers let her go, even though it was out that she had been reported missing. Those officers were fired, something that wouldn't happen in America.
Yeah.
Later on,
Shit.
Tina met up with a friend. They went and got something to eat. Then they were walking down an alley. A man propositioned Tina for sex for money. She accepted and they drove off in the car. And her friend said that that was the last time she had heard from Tina. And that was the last time anybody had seen or heard from her again. Her body was found as described earlier in the Red River 7 days later. The autopsy was unable to determine the cause of death. A man named Raymond Joseph Cormier was charged in her death in December of 2015. He pleaded not guilty and was found not guilty in 2018. So as of right now, whoever did this to Tina is still walking free to this day.
Wow.
Yeah, the next case I want to go over is about a lady named Loretta Saunders. She was an Inuk, which is Inuk. And Inuk or Inuk, I'm not exactly sure. But she is from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. She was a student at St. Mary's University studying criminology, and she was in the process of writing her honors thesis on missing and murdered Indigenous women at the time of her death. She was last seen on February 13th, 2014, and was officially reported missing on February 17th. Her body was found on February 26th near Salisbury, New Brunswick, which is almost 3 hours away. Loretta Saunders was born to Inuk parents. Miriam and Clayton Saunders. Her parents were also foster parents to Aboriginal children in their community. She moved away for a little bit to Montreal. It was said that she lived on the streets and struggled with substance abuse. Loretta returned to Newfoundland years later to work and finish high school. After that, she was accepted into St. Mary's and planned to attend law school. After the discovery of her body and Loretta's car in their possession, her roommates were quickly charged and pled guilty to her murder. Loretta's family grew worried after not speaking to her in several days and receiving odd text messages. Her family reported her missing. Her car was found the next day in the possession of her roommates. Days later, Loretta's body was found in a hockey bag on the side of a highway. The roommates claimed that they killed her because they owed her $430 in rent, and they did not have the money at the time. At the time of her murder, Loretta was pregnant with her first child with her boyfriend of 2.5 years.
That's
Yeah,
sad. That is so sad.
yeah.
I
And
couldn't even. I was just shocked the whole time you were talking
I
about that.
know. It's horrifying. In a recent and particularly harrowing development, Jeremy Skibicki was sentenced to life in prison in 2024 for the murders of four Indigenous women. Morgan Harris, 39, Mercedes Moran, 26, Rebecca Contois, 24, and an unidentified Indigenous woman named Bash Code, which translates to Buffalo Woman. Their remains were found in the Prairie Green landfill north of Winnipeg after years of advocacy and protest by families and Indigenous leaders demanding a search. The case highlighted not only the brutality of these murders, but also the initial reluctance of authorities to investigate and recover remains until sustained public pressure mounted. Before I end this portion of our episode, I want to touch on the Highway of Tears. We will be doing a full episode later on because it deserves a full episode. It's so fucked up. I did want to give you all the shorter version for now. So we cannot talk about missing murdered Indigenous women in Canada without going over the Highway of Tears. It is a stretch of highway, and it's Highway 16, British Columbia, where numerous Aboriginal women and girls have disappeared or been murdered since 1969. Most victims remain unidentified or unsolved, and the cases reflect systemic failures in policing and protections for Indigenous communities. These disappearances span remote regions and urban areas alike, highlighting patterns of vulnerability tied to lack of safe transportation, colonial. Before Rox hits us with some information on resources, let's take a quick break.
Right, ad time. Whoop whoop.
What's up, buddy? Why do you seem bummed?
Honestly, I've been really wanting a new shirt lately, or a coffee mug. Just a little something to treat myself.
And why can't you?
I've searched everywhere. The shirts online are low quality polyester blends, and I hate supporting a man.
Okay, but what about the mugs? What's the issue with those?
Oh, the mugs. Even if I manage to find a mug that doesn't have a number one whoever or live, laugh, love on it, they cost a fortune.
You're right. Mug money is hard to come by in this economy, but you deserve to treat yourself, and I have news that may cheer you up.
Oh, really?
If you head over to thisjustin and itsgrim.com, they have shirts and mugs just like you want.
Are the shirts 100% cotton, not some cheap poly blend?
That's right, and they come in a wide range of sizes. And before you ask, the mugs don't have an inspirational quote.
That sounds too good to be true. It must cost a fortune, or be backed by some kind of corpo scum.
Nope, the prices are steel, and it's run by two best friends. No corpo scum anywhere near the product.
Well, Amy, it looks like I will be able to treat myself after all. This just in and it's grim.com, right?
Yep, and while you're there, sign up for email. You'll get up-to-date information on episodes and the show, of course. Info on merch as well.
Thanks, dude. I'm heading there now, and if the prices are as low as you say, I'll treat you too.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, and we are back. Now, this has all been incredibly heavy and sad, but there's an upside. More of these stories have been making their way into the light due to the advent of social media and advances in technology, and many support groups have popped up as a result. and we think they are worth highlighting. And who couldn't use a pick-me-up, right? So for American and Alaskan Indigenous people, there is the Strong Hearts Native Helpline for people experiencing domestic, dating, and sexual violence. And you can also text NATIVE in all caps to 741-741 for crisis response. The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, Sovereign Bodies Institute, the Urban Indian Health Institute, Native Women's Wilderness, and the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women are all organizations that support missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited peoples causes. Provided resources help families navigate the complex jurisdictional system and advocate for change and justice for Native peoples. In Australia, the First Nations Advocates Against Family Violence, National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Women's Alliance work alongside individuals like Amber and Lily Hayward and Professor Kylie Cripps to push for systemic change, better supports, and justice for First Nations women and children experiencing extreme violence. Their fight has led to an Australian Parliament inquiry into the epidemic. And finally, 13 Yarn, a crisis support service run by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And that's 13 Yarn, Y-A-R-N. In South America, leaders from 21 countries gathered for a regional consultation to address femicide in Latin countries against Native women and girls, resulting in law and policy changes across the countries. The Maria Verde or Green Wave movement is also spreading across the landscape, bringing attention to these issues. Some international organizations have offered aid as well, like CSVANW and the Indian Law Resource Center. But support remains incredibly scarce, leaving women to advocate for themselves, like the Quechua women of Ecuador, who lobbied clauses to be added to the national constitution to protect their rights. And in Europe, the European Human Rights Advocacy Center, International Federation of Social Workers, and Victims Support Europe are trying to bring light to these issues. Law offices have also begun expanding services to Indian country, offering legal counsel and consulting on the complexities of the judicial system. And finally, in Canada, there is Hope for Wellness Hotline, the Native Women's Association of Canada, Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers, Battered Women's Support Services, and the I Am a Kind Man program that supports men to end violence against women. Canada also has some badass ladies leading the fight, like Gladys Raddick, who coordinates extensive walks to raise awareness, and the Red Dress Project by Jamie Black, which has sparked other artists to use red in their work to raise awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirits. Guys, if you're still here, congrats. Yeah. You're still here. Yeah, and we made it. We made it.
That was a lot.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's a wrap on that, though. I have no more awful. Well, we have a lot more awful information about what's going on, but it's going to be for another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But the next one is going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So next episode will wrap us up on the social justice series, and I'm very excited. It's not as serious as some of our other topics. It still is serious. Everything we do kind of is heavy and serious and dark, but it's a little bit lighter. We're ending it on a little bit of a lighter note.
Yes.
Do you want to tell them what it is?
Yes, we are tackling satanic panic.
Woo! I'm very excited, guys. I'm very excited.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. So that is all, folks.
That is it. If you guys want merch or want to check out past episodes, you can visit our website, This Just In, and it's grim.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on live, or we'll have a new episode uploaded in a couple weeks.
Yep. All right.
All right.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.